Welcome to the first day of Computer Science Senior Seminar. We have two talks for you today, and we're going to start out with Nafis, so I'll let him introduce his project.
Hello everyone, I am Nafis Ahmed Munim. Today I'm talking about ProfitView, which is empowering small businesses with financial insight, a web application. This is my senior experience talk. Now let's talk about myself first for a minute. So I'm Nafis Ahmed Munim. I'm an international student at Lawrence University. I am majoring in computer science and economics, and my minor is data science. And another information, I have been working with US Ventures in Appleton as a data scientist, which was kind of like a bigger motivation behind this project. And on my free time, I usually like cooking, playing FIFA and all with my friends. Now let's go ahead and start with a preview of ProfitView. So ProfitView is a web-based financial dashboard application designed to empower mainly small businesses with actionable financial insights. There will be a lot of key features in ProfitView that you will go ahead and see in the demo. One of them is it will help all the small businesses to track their sales, track their costs, track different products that they sell, and most importantly, a forecast of their sales, their accounts receivable, accounts payable, where they can project their cash flow in the future. The main motivation behind this ProfitView was to help small businesses because they have limited access to financial expertise, or like to hire a data scientist or to hire a financial analyst. And ProfitView will be bridging that gap between the resources that small businesses doesn't have and the importance of the financial insight that small businesses need to grow and become sustainable. Now let's talk about what was the inspiration or the relevance of this project and how did it actually came to my hand. So let's talk about like a very small story. So over the summer in 2023, I got an opportunity to work for US Venture as a data scientist in an internship. And the first project that I started working on was called cash forecasting. So that idea was fairly new to me. When I got into the project, I actually saw how interesting this thing is and how small businesses or any kind of businesses can be benefited with cash forecasting. I was doing like a lot of modeling for US Venture, and I saw when my model got at least like 94 to 95% accurate, I can see the return on investment right in front of my eyes. And it completely hit my head that if small businesses can have this kind of technology, and if they can actually use this kind of programs, they can be really benefited by it, and they can maximize their profit and become sustainable. And then I started doing my researches and made some observations, talked with some small businesses like taco trucks on downtown and all, and they say they have never done any kind of financial insights like that, and they have never tried to actually reach someone or use that expertise. But when I asked them, would that be really helpful for you guys? And they were like, yes, because at the end of the day, some days we actually have a lot of waste of food. We actually maybe buy a lot of inventory which never gets sold. And we definitely can feel that there is a seasonality in the sales, there is a trend in the sales, but it's really hard for us to exactly guess how much our sales would be or how does our cash flow looks like. And ProfitView will bridge that gap, as I already told, by playing a really vital role in providing those insights to small businesses. And that's all made me motivated to build something like this so that there can be economic growth too, because 99.9% of the businesses in the United States are small businesses, and 47.1% of the employees in the United States are private workforces. So if small businesses can excel, the economy can excel too. Now let's directly jump into the live demo of ProfitView. So if you see here, this is the opening page or the login page of the application ProfitView. You can see in the top bar there are the menu items. So you need to first log into your application, which is your username and password, and your password is always backed up by a hash password. So even if the data is leaked or something, it's really hard to like breach the security. So it's using hash password, which I will also show in the code demo. So I will go ahead and log into the system first. So you can see it says I am logged in into my account, and then the first main page that is the dashboard. So you can see the dashboard will be something where you will have a complete, very easy to read in front of your eyes, a total history of like what you have income, what was your total accounts receivable until now, what was your total accounts payable until now, and what is your total profit. And you can see the next box shows what is the forecast total from today's date to 4 months after now. So right now the forecasting is set up to give you an analysis of 4 months. It can be changed into the system, but when it's 4 months, it's not trying to predict too much further, and what is happening is it's trying to get more accurate, which I will also demo in the code review. So you can see it also tells you what is the forecasted receivable that you can expect to have within the next 4 months, then the forecasted payable, the cost, and then the forecasted profit. And it also shows you a total balance sheet. So that total balance sheet is really important that I thought of, because when I actually saw companies like US Venture and their motive to do this kind of project, one of the main motive was so that they can instantly look into something and say, okay, after 5 months, I will have this much amount from my business. So they will know earlier on if they can actually start investing on something right now. Maybe rebuilding their shop, maybe getting in like more inventory, getting in some fancy technology and something. So this total balance sheet forecasted is also really important for any kind of small businesses. Then let's go ahead and look to the next step, which is sales, where what you can do is you can directly enter any sales that you have. And it is very easy to use, because we know that sometimes small businesses, there are a lot of small businesses that they're not comfortable using technology sometimes, but this is really easy to use, because if you have like a laser thing to scan, what you can do, you can just scan your product ID here, and it will like put up your product ID automatically, and you can put up the date and the amount that you sold, and it will have all those history in the data. And you can see like I have like history for about like 2 years, which is actually a dummy data that I built to actually figure out how the system is working and how accurate it is predicting. And next, what you can do is you have the sales history, and you can just hit the generate forecast button, and what it does is takes a second, and then the forecast got generated. So I can go to the sales forecast and see. You can see you have a graph here for the forecasted values for next 4 months, and the actual values that you have over the time. I will demo later on in the code how I think it is actually doing a pretty much good job. So how this dummy data is actually set up is that it is trying to tell you that so what I did in the dummy data is that I created like a function where you will have like a seasonality build up like with a sine function, and then you have a linear trend build up with like a simple linear function and all. So you can see it also tells you the forecasted values that you have over the next 4 months on a daily basis. So we'll come back to this and actually recheck if actually our model is doing better. And then you have the unique price entries. So maybe you will be selling different kind of products, and you can also sell, also like put in the system which vendor you are buying those products from, what is the unit price, which actually goes to the database and figures out what is the total accounts receivable, because it's just a factor of multiplying the unit that you are selling and the price of that product ID. You can add any kind of new product that you want. You can update any kind of product. So let's just try updating like one product, like let's say the Zillow vendor 1, so the product ID is 5. Let's say the new price is like 70, and I can change the vendor to maybe like, I can just do Zillow again. And then if I update, you can see that the price is updated. So this is important because as time goes by, you might update your prices of a different product. And then the next tab here is the total sales or the accounts receivable. So what here is showing you is that what is the total USD amount of the product that you are selling, and you can generate forecasts from here too. When you hit generate forecasts, it will take some time to generate the forecast, so it tells you forecast generated and saved successfully. Then you have an ARAP forecast page where if you go, you can see the graph and the forecasted values of the total AR forecasts. And then the next tab that you have is the costs. So you can enter all the costs that you have and all the costs that you really want to add in your system. And in the same way, you can generate forecasts. You can add description, the USD amount, what vendor you are actually like using that money for. Are you paying a vendor, or is it a fixed cost, or stuff like that? You can put the unit prices and the amount too. So you can see I already generated the forecasts for my costs. And then when I go to the ARAP page, you can see I have my accounts receivable forecast and my costs forecast side by side, which is also really easy to use. Anyone in the small businesses can go and see, okay, I have both of them here. I can see how my business have actually grown over time, and I can also see what I can expect to sell and what I can expect to spend on my business. And then you have the dashboard where you can get actual USD amounts to, very visible to you, and then you can actually use those statistics to take decisions for your small businesses. Now let's go ahead and look at the code. At first, let's look at the database or how it's set up. So you can see I have a bunch of tables over here and a bunch of views. So the tables, what they are doing is mostly they are saving all the information that you are trying to input. Let's say the cost entries, the accounts payable entries, the sales that you are entering and everything, the unit prices and everything, and also the user information are also saved here. So you can see in the user information, it's just saving your username, and your password is actually a hashed password. So we are also taking care of the security of data for all our like small businesses. And then we have all the views where mostly the financials are aggregated, like the total sales, the total profit and everything. You can see I have views like accounts payable, aggregated, the balance sheet, daily total sales and stuff like that. And the next thing that I want to show is actually the backend. So there is three parts of the total system. The first one was the database, managing the database that I already showed. The second part is the backend, which is created in, which is written in Python. Mostly the tools that were used was like Flask, so it is a Python Flask backend. I have used JWT tokens for security purposes, and there are different forecasting techniques that has been used, like ARIMA, like Sarimax, and other functions like AutoArima and a forecasting model like AppBprofit. So let's first dig into the backend at first. So you can see here is the backend code. So it is like a Flask backend, as I said, and the database is connected with a CORS policy. So you can see I am initializing my database over here in the first function. Then what I have, another thing is that right after I am done asking for a request, which I will talk about later, then the database is actually like initializing before I put in any request for my data. Like if I'm asking that give me this kind of data, it is initializing the database connection with MySQL connector in Python. And you can see mostly all the functions are pretty straightforward. You can see it's using like a decorator called cross origin, which is really important so that the users can actually access this from different type of web browsers. Like at first I was having problem, like I was first when I built like at least a part of my web application, I was trying to use Safari to test my web application, and it was not working. And I was tensed a lot. I talked with Professor Greg about it, and then I figured out it was actually like a cross-origin problem. But later on, I did use Chrome for all kind of testing, which is more accessible and more easier to figure out any kind of errors and all. So you can see I have the function for login, and you can register as a new account, as you also saw in the demo. Then again, like using like access tokens and everything. And then I have functions where I have like either adding an entry, removing an entry, updating entry. It could be costs, it could be your sales that you are entering, it could be any kind of unit prices that you are entering. I have specific functions for each of them. And what it's doing is it's creating like an API. So add entry and integer user. So every time that you actually is calling the backend for an information, you need to make sure that you are logged in. And the JWT required is also helping in that, so that you have like security to access any kind of tab or any kind of data that you want. And you have basic functions like get entries. Similar to that, you can see there are like in all the functions we have like an try and accept kind of structured, so that anytime, so there is a lot of API calls that's happening. So anytime if any of that actually lose connection with your MySQL connector, right? That happened to me a lot. Then it can show you an error that why it's actually not trying to connect, or maybe some other problems, and it will show you a pop-up just exactly how it showed you a pop-up of like generating forecasters successfully. So then let's dig into the main part or the heart of this web application, because you also know there is a lot of web application out there where you can just like put in all your data, right? You can have like what are you selling, what are you like spending on and stuff like that. But the main heart of this and the main function of this web application is it lets you forecast, which is as much as possible accurate. So you can see I have like a function here for performing forecast. So what I am doing at first is that I am pulling in all the product sales historical data from my database, and then I am doing a little bit of aggregation on a day level, because you can enter, like in a day you can sell the same product like 10 times, right? But all we really want to know is how much in total we have sold for that specific product. So you can see I have resampled all my data to a day level sum. So what we can do later on, or could be a future enhancement, is you can have like different sectors in it. You can do like a monthly forecast, a daily forecast, or maybe like a yearly forecast too. So you have that flexibility to put it into the system, which could be like a future enhancement. And then what I am doing is I'm splitting my training and testing data. So for testing data, I am saving like 4 months of history, where I will test my forecasting model and see how accurate it is. And we are trying out mainly two main forecasting, time series forecasting model. The first one is ARIMA, and the second one is FB Profit. So the FB Profit, at first you can see I am fitting the FB Profit, where there are a lot of hyperparameters that needs to be tuned. But here, as this is a daily data, or mostly sales will be like a daily data, I have put like a yearly seasonality equal to true and the weekly seasonality equal to true, so that my system knows that there might be seasonality regarding like a yearly seasonality or a weekly, so that it can catch those seasonality. And what FB Profit is actually doing, it is kind of trying to figure out how's the trend of the sales over time. Is there any seasonality in terms of week, in terms of maybe holidays too? As you can see in the code, I have also like put in the country holidays, because there might be days where in country holidays there might have been no sales, right? So that is also taking into account into the system. And then I am feeding the model into my historical data. That is the Profit function that's doing. And then there is another forecasting technique that we are trying, which is the auto ARIMA function. What it does is It just takes your historical data and tries to figure out what PDQ values for ARIMA. So ARIMA model has three main components. The first one is the auto-regressive, then the I for integrated, and MA for moving average. So all those components have some hyperparameters regarding it, which is called P, D, and Q. So what AutoArima function does is it tries to fit your historical data and figure out those P, D, and Q values for you, and then gives you the best ARIMA model that has the lowest RMSE, which is the root mean squared error for you, and then it tells you, okay, these are the hyperparameters. If you use this, you're gonna have the lowest RMSE for your model or for your data. So that's why I'm using AutoArima model. So these are functions that has already been prepared by people, and I am trying my best to use all the resources that I have and not to write any kind of function myself, because these are very renowned functions and it has been working best for a lot of companies, a lot of researchers and everything. Then what is happening here is, so let's say I have my historical data. I told FB Prophet, you do a forecast. I told AutoArima, you do a forecast. And then I am trying to see, okay, I have two forecasts. Which of those forecasts has actually the lowest RMSE value, or the root mean squared error? Then I'm telling that, okay, FB Prophet has the lowest RMSE, so this is for sure doing better than my AutoArima. Then give me the forecast results that FB Prophet produced. If my AutoArima is doing the same, I'm telling it, you give me the best forecasted values. So as I have talked about the forecaster, let's see how I actually created the dummy data, which is really important to figure out if it is actually figuring out what is happening with your historical data. So you can see I have like a trend set up. So this is how I set up my dummy data. I have a trend set up, which is, so this is for the cost. I starts at 1,000 and stops at 3,000 because it's a dummy data. I haven't got this data from like any company or anything. And you can see for annual seasonality, I'm trying to put in like a sine function into the line space so that I have some random seasonality. Then the same thing goes for the weekly seasonality, and which is a little bit lower than the annual seasonality in terms of like how it's actually creating the dummy data. Then I am adding some random term with each of the numbers so that the data that I am actually creating is completely random. So you can see, let's go back here. So you can see in the actual values, you can see that, okay, there is like a type of like a sine curve happening in a yearly seasonality. And you can see if you try to fit like a linear regression line, it is upward trending. And if you see to our forecast, what it actually doing is, it is actually figuring out that in a weekly way, there is like a side trend, right? And then you can see even in the forecasted, it showed you that even in future, you will show this sine trend. And where I can assure myself that it is actually trying to do better, right? It is actually figuring out that sine trend. And not only the sine trend, it is also figuring out that upward trend. If you look at it closely, you can see that this line is actually going up. Like it is having a little bit of an upward trend. For the costs one, what I did is that I again tried to figure out if my system is actually doing the best job it can do. You can see it also has like a sine curve property in a yearly seasonality, but which is really hard to follow, right? It's like, it's not like completely clear, but you can see even in the forecasted value, it is not as much as like the accounts receivable forecast. It is also figuring out that the seasonality is not like, going up and down a lot. It's more kind of consistent, but it still has that sine curve property in the forecasted value. And this one is also a little bit upward trending, as it is just for 4 months. The upward trending is a little bit hard to figure out, but you can still see that it was at 2,500 and now it is going towards like 3,000, which is like going upward trending. So
Nafis, something really important to point out is that the timescales for the red curves are different than the blue curves.
Yeah.
Because the red curve covers what, a year
Yeah,
or
it's
more?
for a year. It's more condensed, so it's
Yeah,
more visible.
So that's why
to
you
see.
don't really see the seasonality in the upper curves, because they're only
Yep.
4 months, not a
Uh-huh.
year.
Yeah, but you can see the weekly seasonality that
Sure.
it's going up and down. So where I can know that actually my forecasts are doing better. Now let's talk about the front end a little bit. So mostly all the other backend functions are pretty simple. I have this kind of forecast function written for different components that I really want to forecast, like that I have shown in my system, like the accounts receivable, payable, and the sales forecast. And then let's go to the front end. So what's happening in the front end is I have written the front end in React using Byte React.js, and I have tried to use a little bit of Material UI to make the web application nicer, but it's still in process, and there is still opportunity for future enhancements that I believe. So you can see all the components. So first, the dashboard components, you can see I am actually trying to fetch from that API call using like a JWT. This is like the first one is like a get method for fetching all the entries. So this one is I am fetching both the forecasted values and also like the actual values so that I can put it up in the dashboard. For most of the fetch properties, there is always like a catch and error thing, like again, so that I am always sure that it's not actually throwing me an error and I am unaware of it. And then you can see like mostly it is like simple like classes and divs, different components. I have like the dashboard section class name. You can see the first one is the first component that we saw in our dashboard. Just going back to that. So, okay, I ran the app data one first. Okay, so you can see like in the front end there are components like this, and then I have like a CSS custom style sheet also written so that there is more enhancement and it look nicer on the front end part. So this is mostly the application. Another thing that I wanted to show was the material UI part. So for the material UI, what I had to do is I was kind of researching about what are different ways to make your web page nicer. Then I found out material UI could be like one of the easier way. You just have to install, and then I imported different components, like as you saw in the front end, like the app bar, the toolbar, the buttons, the containers, and everything. And it is fairly simple to use. It is just you have to like specify the components and the colors and everything, and it is really useful and easier because you can just go to the Material UI website and they have like already set up codes and divs set up for you. You can also do custom setup on their website and put that code back into your system, which might look like make your web page look really nice. So that was the demo of the web application. Now let's go back and talk a little bit about what could be the future enhancement, and talk about how already like what hurdles I have gone through and everything. So the initial, I have that idea I already talked about from US venture projects and everything. There were a lot of technical hurdles, like some of them I already talked about. Maybe some of them was like I was not being able to synchronize my database with my backend for a lot of time. I used different applications like Postman to like continuously try all the API calls out and everything. So there was always a learning curve included in there. There were ups and downs. I was getting something, then something was actually breaking down, then I was trying myself, I was taking my professors how to overcome all those hurdles, and at last the project evolved. And some of the progress markers was getting finished with my backend first and trying out all, I can actually access data from the backend all the time. I can maybe save data through the backend to my database all the time. And some learning outcomes was that I know now completely how forecasting models work. That was a huge learning opportunity for me. I am still learning different time series forecasting techniques like XGBoost, some neural network techniques like RNN, LSTM, and everything. So these actually motivated me to learn all those more and more. I have already talked about what's new in Profit View. One of the important thing that I again wanted to emphasize was that it is not actually relying on only one time series forecasting method, but two, but it still has potentiality to include more forecasting techniques. As I actually learn them in my learning curve, I might include them, so that it's a huge opportunity that it is actually taking the best out of the best to give you a forecast. Then other important things is that, like in the US, approximately like 20% of the small businesses fail because they don't have any clear projection of where they are going. They just think it's more kind of like an ordering inventory and selling them, but all those financial insights can actually let them know and help them to visualize more if they are progressing or not. Then talking a little bit about whether the takes behind Profit View, the technical skills I needed, I think you already understood, was like a full stack web development, creating the database, managing it, the interface design, data analysis and data manipulation, and also most importantly, the time series forecasting techniques. The tools used I already talked about. Other than that, I used MySQL Workbench, as you saw. I used flaws, cores, JWT, stuff like that, or functions like that. Most of my learning experience was through online resources. Most of the part of it from the data science part was my internship experience and some of my data science classes for data analysis and manipulation. But other than that, it was mostly online resources like YouTube, Coursera. I got a huge opportunity to be mentored by Professor Greg, who helped me a lot at times to figure out different errors and give me guidance to what new functions can I add, what can I do with different stuffs. Then I actually came down and tried practically implementing everything. There were technical challenges, like my SQL Workbench was giving me a hard time. Like it was not downloading, it was like I couldn't even send my whole database and export it to Professor Greg at the end of the term. It was giving me a huge hard time. So those were times where I was sitting back, but then I again tried my best to overcome those hurdles. So it was completely a continuous learning for me. It also helped me because I took help from ChatGPT for analyzing different errors. I used Stack Overflow and all, which was also part of my learning curve and helped me to overcome challenges. The interdisciplinary insights, I think I already talked about it a little bit on the data science side, but as an econ major, it also helped me to understand that would actually small businesses be benefited? I also needed to understand how all the accounts, or what are the most important components for a small business to look on, right? There could be other different components too, but I really wanted it to be very easily accessible and something that small businesses can very easily use and just look at it and take some financial decisions. So right now, if they use it, they don't have to guess like, okay, I'm selling 20 products tomorrow. They can rather have a guess which is backed up by a system which is actually analyzing their historical data. So some future enhancements that I want to make in my web development is first implementing multivariated time series forecasting. So right now, the time series forecasting is just taking into account that, okay, in that date, that week of that year, he sold that much, and it actually grew that this way, or it has seasonality this way. Now what could it be? I really want to integrate multivariated time series forecasting, taking into account more variables. Maybe if it's like an ice cream shop, what was the weather that day? Did it affect your sales or not? So those are some information, some important things that I really want to put in the future enhancements. And also like implement ways of integrating historical sales data, because there could be a small business, they are not new, they have been in business for 3 years, but they started using our system, they don't know, they have data maybe in Excel, right? So I want to integrate a system so that it can actually like taking historical sales data in any format and put it in our database. That is another thing that I want to do. And maybe I also want to enhance this by adding a financial dashboard only for the owner, so that he can also have his personal finance in that and maybe show different screens to give personalized investment options like stocks and everything. And also there is another important thing that I wanted to do is maybe like a function of like keeping track of all the invoices and all the vouchers, which gets automatically tracked down to their sales and cost data, which would be really nice for small businesses to have. So this is all the feature enhancement. I'm really interested as in this time series forecasting thing and in the web development, and I hope in future I can make all those changes and take this application somewhere so that small businesses can actually get benefited, they get empowered to grow their business, make it sustainable so that our economy as a whole gets sustainable. Thank you everyone. I'll be up for any kind of questions and all.
Okay, questions for Nafis?
How was like the process of like integrating like the Python backend and like your data models into like the React front end? How did that go? Were like there any difficulties with
Yeah,
that?
so that part was not that hard because I know that in our classes we did like a Java backend, so it's fairly the same way. So what the backend is actually doing is whenever you are requesting an API, it's just processing that and giving you like a JSON file, right? So in terms of the front end, what you just have to do is you don't have to interact anything Python specific with it, rather you have to interact with just the API call, and it's actually returning you a JSON file, right? It's the matter of how you are processing the JSON file that you're getting back, or how you are processing a JSON file and then giving it back to the system to save something. So that part was not that hard to integrate. It was like similar process than having like a Java backend, but I really wanted to learn like a new language and do backend in a new language, and I did do that, and I did learn like how to use Flask backends. I did learn how like MySQL connector works in terms of Python and everything. So that was the intention to use Python. Yep.
I was wondering if you had a chance to talk to any small businesses, or if you didn't.
Yep. I talked with like Diablo's Tacos, and then I talked with like a saloon. So if you know Tapers downtown, I talked with them about like if actually forecasting could be something that could be helpful for them. And my dad back home has his own business, so that was really helpful. As I have grown up, I know that in a business, if you can actually even guess the future a little bit, how much help that it could be for you. Because if you know after 4 months you're gonna sell like a tire, right? What US Venture does is they know that, okay, I might need 200 tires like this after 4 months. And they know that winter is a very bad time to get tires from the dealership because the prices are so high. So if they know 4 months ago that, okay, I might need 200 tires from there, they would just get it for like a bare minimum price because they know they're gonna sell that. So that is really important for their inventory purchases and a different other financial insights, right?
I have a suggestion. So the data that you're using to test your system has some nice features. You demonstrate sort of weekly periodicity and seasonality and upward trends and things like that. Something that you might also try integrating into your test data or other sort of real world kinds of things that are a little bit weirder, like for example, a business that does most of its business like in the weeks leading up to Halloween or something like that. You know, like having these weird spikes in the sales figures. It would be interesting to see if you put that in, whether or not the forecasting model picks that up correctly and models it correctly.
Thank you, Professor, for that, because I remember I thought about it because like in real world data, there's a lot of anomalies. So which might affect your forecasting a lot, because when usually in my daily to daily work experience, I also handle those kind of anomalies. It's always like a pain in the head. So That is something that needs to get integrated, but another important thing that I considered for it is like there might be anomalies where only businesses can explain why did that happen. So that is also a part which I need to take consideration into, because even if in the data I really want to impute like a value, like maybe just using moving average, just average that spike or anything, that could be done, but it might be that for that business, that point was really helpful. Or maybe that point, they had some explanation for that data point. So that is something that I also need to take consideration into. So yeah, but that's a really great idea that I might also take into account.
So sort of based just another question. So with some of the user interface, like when you hit generate forecast, it seems to jump to another tab in order to see what that actually does. Do you consider potentially giving more of an indication to the user that something has changed, or possibly
So
linking
I
them
think
directly to that page?
pop-up shows up that like I don't know if you saw that, like like forecast got generated and saved successfully.
Okay, so that'll happen regardless. I was unsure if it was like a debug thing or if it was because it was being
Yeah,
I
so
wasn't sure.
I don't know, like there were some errors happening right now. It might be because like I have also ran the backend for the data. So if you can see for the app.data where I generated my data, that was also running in the background. So that's why it was showing error. But I think that is also important, because if there is something that is actually showing you error that forecasts have not generated, which is also important, because then the businesses or someone using it might know that the forecast that I already have in the page might not be very reliable because it didn't get generated now and it is showing error. So like for now, maybe this kind of like errors could be helpful also in real sense. But thanks for that idea. I also had that idea, maybe after generating it directly goes to the forecast page. But there is so many forecast components that businesses might want to move back into. So that's why I didn't do that part. Yep, thank you.
You mentioned that you sort of use two different models, FB Profit and ARIMA, and then sort of for any given forecast, it chooses the one that reduces the error. Is that correct?
Yep.
So like for instance, even with this sort of fabricated data that you generated, which one did it choose? And can you tell us a little more about
Yep.
the differences between the two? I mean, the general idea must be, of how they work, must be different if
So right now, I can only see that information into my terminal. That's how I have set it up. So if you can see those, no, I can't zoom anymore. If you can see these two numbers, the 49 and
Yeah.
295, these are the RMSE's values from the models. So this one is coming from the profit. That's how I have set up the print statement. And this one is coming from the ARIMA. So I know that right now the RMSE smaller is 49 for the first model, which is the profit. So for sure it is saving the profit forecast.
Okay.
So I can also show the code.
I mean, it's kind of hard to read the code from here anyway, but just, like, in the most intuitive terms for us, how do they work differently from each other that would make that much of it? That seems like quite a big difference in error, for instance, with the data that you used right there. But in the next data set, it might be the other way around, right?
Yep,
So what are they doing that's
It's
sort of
the
fundamentally-
algorithm that's different.
Yeah,
So
how are they different?
So how the algorithm are different is like how ARIMA is how like ARIMA is doing stuff is the hyperparameters that it's taking into account. It's like the auto-regressive part, the moving average part. So the PDQ. So usually what in data analysis, what you usually do is you look at plots called ACF plot and PACF plots from where you get the value of the P, and D is the differencing. So it's like you can difference your data points, right? So maybe I'm differencing in one step. So you can do a differencing in one step or two step. So what it does is until it comes to a position that you differenced and your like your historical data doesn't show any trend. like which there is another test which is called the Dickey-Fuller test, ADF test. From that test, it tells you if the data is stationary or not. So it will keep doing differencing until that data becomes stationary, and after it becomes stationary, it selects that D value to be integrated into the model. And the Q value also comes to like a seasonality thing from a PACF plot. So I don't have the equations that it uses
Yeah.
on top of my head, but I know how exactly you
Yeah,
can
just
select those parameters.
intuitively, how is that different from the
Yeah.
other method?
So that is the ARIMA thing, and in
Yeah.
terms of Profit, so the difference is, what Profit does is it figures out like a change point. So it actually, in your historical data, it tries to figure out where are all the change points that happening. And then it assesses the change points. If you even see at the Profit model parameters here, you can see it was like change point prior scale, seasonality prior scale, the seasonality mode and all. There is two different modes for seasonality. One is the additive mode and one is the multiplicative mode. So usually multiplicative mode is used for some more data which has like huge amount of random noise. So as I am expecting that my data that I set up doesn't have a lot of white noise or random noise, so that's why I'm using the additive one. And then the change point prior scale, it's like, it's kind of like the change point that it is trying to figure out. It's like you can think of it as like a confidence interval or like a band. So it's creating a band like that I'm setting it up here, and then it's saying that, okay, the data points, is it going all the way up above the band or all the way up down the band? If it goes outside that band, it is trying to figure out, okay, that's where my data point is actually changing. And I actually can see that in the historical data, there is a change point. And that's how it integrates. And another basic difference is that in the Profit model, I have also included like the country holidays, but ARIMA doesn't take into account something like that. And another thing that ARIMA doesn't do is like the weekly seasonalities.
It
So
kind of sounds like the Profit model,
it's doing better.
well,
Because
it's doing better than ARIMA with their data?
yeah, the Profit is doing better here.
Okay.
So also that can be backed up by ARIMA is not actually taking weekly seasonalities in that way.
Yeah.
So it is not like looking into seasonalities in terms of like, okay, there is a, this is a week, how much it has changed. It's more trying to figure out in terms of like first setting up a linear equation, then saying like how, if I difference the data, how does it become stationary, or like the moving averages mostly.
Yeah. Would you expect ARIMA to do better if you had 3 years worth of data instead of 4 months? Or whether it was like real data instead of just fabricated sine wave?
So it depends. Mostly I have seen even from my experience, like Profit does the, like ARIMA is usually the one which does the best most of the time with random data. But Profit usually does really good if you have a data which you can maybe be confident that it is something consistent. It's not something like that you have sold product worth of like $1,000 today and like $1 million tomorrow. I think in those cases, Profit usually don't like perform the best. But ARIMA does, because like when it does the moving average part, it actually smoothens out a lot of things in the randomness. But Profit doesn't do that.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? for
I got a
Nafis?
question. So through this project, in what areas have you built confidence within yourself, and what new skills do you value from teaching yourself?
I think the first value is that even in our classes, what we did is maybe sometimes the backend was created by Professor Greg or Professor Krebsbach, and we were doing the front ends. Like this was the first time when I actually started something from zero and actually brought it somewhere. I got professor's help, but it was mostly me bringing in the ideas and telling him what I want to implement. And this was the first time maybe without being in a class, like a formal academic class, I actually thought of a project myself from zero, have been to 50 someday, drop back to zero again, and go again. I think the important thing that I learned was how to restart. Like you can restart every week, every day if you need to. So that was the main thing that I learned. And in terms of technical skills, I think technical skills is something that even if you give some effort and time, you could learn. But it was the abstract thing that I myself took the most out of it.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Thank you again, Nafis.